Michael and Sarah Bennett had long dreamed of a big family. They lived in a cozy house in the suburbs and were already raising their 7-year-old son, Timmy. But Sarah always wanted another child, and after years of unsuccessful attempts to get pregnant, the couple decided to adopt a girl. They chose 11-year-old Annabelle, a quiet, reserved girl with a sad past. Her parents had died in a car accident, and she had spent several years in different foster homes, none of which could provide her with stability. Annabelle immediately made an impression as a well-mannered and gentle child. She quickly bonded with Sarah, began calling her Mom, and maintained exemplary behavior. However, Timmy, whom they tried to explain had gained a sister, was suspicious of her from the start. "Mom, she scares me," he confessed one evening as they were getting ready for bed. "Why, sweetheart? What happened?" Sarah asked, trying to calm her son. "She stands by my bed at night, just looks at me." Sarah decided it was just the child's imagination, still adjusting to the changes in the family. She hugged Timmy gently and reassured him that everything would be fine. But a few days later, something made her doubt that. One night, Sarah woke up to a strange sound. At first, she thought it was the rustling of the wind outside, but then she realized she was hearing footsteps. Stepping into the hallway, she saw Annabelle standing near the stairs, motionless, as if lost in thought. "Annabelle?" Sarah called softly. "What are you doing here?" The girl jumped, as if caught doing something wrong. She turned her gaze away and quietly replied, "I couldn't sleep." Her voice sounded normal, but something in her tone sent shivers down Sarah's spine. The strange behavior began to show during the day as well. One morning, Timmy found his toys broken. The wheels of his toy cars had been torn off, and his favorite stuffed bear was lying with its belly slashed open. "It was Annabelle," the boy exclaimed angrily. "I saw her hiding my toys in the closet." Sarah tried to talk about this with Michael. "I think something's wrong," she said one evening when they were alone. She's acting weird." "Sarah, you're overreacting," Michael countered. "She's been through a lot. She just needs time to adjust." But things in the house grew increasingly odd. Sarah noticed that on the family photos in the living room, only their faces, hers and Michael's, were scratched. Annabelle's portrait remained untouched. When she asked the girl about it, Annabelle simply shrugged. "Probably Timmy did it." Sarah began to suspect that the girl was deliberately trying to tear their family apart. She decided to keep a closer watch on her. One night, Sarah purposely left the door ajar. At around 2 a.m., she heard soft footsteps. Going into the hallway, she saw Annabelle walking downstairs. Hiding around the corner, Sarah began to watch. The girl approached the couch where Michael was sleeping and stood there for a long time, holding something in her hands. Her figure froze in the silence, and it seemed as if she wasn't even breathing. When Annabelle turned her head and met Sarah's gaze, her face slowly stretched into a mysterious smile. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, trying to keep calm. Annabelle took a step back and quietly replied, "Just checking if everything's okay." She turned and went back to her room, leaving Sarah standing in the dark hallway with her heart pounding in fear. Something was definitely wrong with this girl. Annabelle's behavior became increasingly strange. At first, her habits seemed innocent. She would sit in her room for hours, either drawing or writing in a notebook she always hid when someone entered. But each passing day, this behavior started to raise an inexplicable anxiety in Sarah. Annabelle avoided conversation, only occasionally responding with short phrases, and her gaze, cold and vacant, often seemed to look right through people. Sarah tried several times to talk to the girl, but each attempt was met with a wall of silence. One day, deciding to convince herself that nothing was wrong, she cautiously knocked on Annabelle's bedroom door. "Annabelle, what are you drawing?" Sarah asked, trying to speak softly. "Nothing interesting, Mom," the girl replied, not even lifting her eyes. On the desk, Sarah noticed what looked like drawings, but Annabelle quickly covered them with her notebook. "Can I see?" Sarah asked. "It's personal," the girl answered quietly but firmly. Something in her refusal was so definitive that it sent a chill through Sarah. The explosion of anxiety came one morning. Sarah woke up to an unusually sharp smell that immediately triggered panic. She rushed out of bed and ran to the kitchen, where she saw that all the burners on the gas stove were turned on, but the flame was out. The level of gas in the air was so high that Sarah instantly felt dizzy. "My God!" she exclaimed, rushing to turn off the stove and open the windows. The air gradually became fresher, but fear still gripped her heart. At the kitchen table, Annabelle was calmly eating cereal. Her face showed no emotion, as if nothing had happened. "Annabelle, were you in the kitchen?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice calm, though panic was already welling up in her chest. "Yes," the girl replied, licking her spoon. "Did you leave the gas on?" Sarah couldn't hide the tremor in her voice. "I forgot to turn it off," Annabelle answered, giving a barely noticeable smile. That smile, though small, struck Sarah more than any words could. It carried something almost ominous, like a cold irony that was visible in the girl's eyes. Later that evening, Timmy came up to his mother as they were putting away his toys. He suddenly stopped, as if hesitating to say something. "Mom, I saw her turn the knobs on the stove," he finally confessed. "She just watched the gas come out. She did it on purpose, I know." Sarah tried to calm her son, but his words sank deep into her heart. She decided to talk to Michael about it, but as always, he brushed off her concerns. "It's just a kid who forgot," he said with a shrug. "You're overreacting." Sarah knew that Michael might be right, but her instincts were screaming the opposite. In Annabelle's gaze, her quiet movements, and mysterious behavior, there was something that made Sarah feel real fear. That evening, as Sarah lay in bed, she couldn't fall asleep. Her mind was racing with thoughts of what could have happened if she hadn't woken up in time. She felt as though there was a danger in the house, something she couldn't explain yet, but that she could feel with every nerve in her body. Sarah couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. Annabelle's behavior was becoming more and more bizarre, and the incident with the gas stove left a deep mark on her mind. She decided to learn more about the girl's past, hoping to find answers that would shed light on her motives. A phone call to the shelter was her first step. However, the response she received was far from what she expected. The shelter worker spoke uncertainly and evasively. Unfortunately, most of Annabelle's records were lost during an archive move, but I can tell you that she never stayed long in any foster family. They often sent her back. "Why? What happened?" Sarah pressed, feeling the tension tightening in her chest. "We don't keep detailed reasons," came the reply, but the families often said they had trouble coping with her behavior. Those words planted an invisible shadow in Sarah's mind. She couldn't just leave it at that. Returning home, Sarah began going through Annabelle's things, hoping to find some clue. She felt guilty but kept telling herself she was doing it for the safety of the family. In the bottom drawer of the dresser, she found an old, crumpled document that looked like a medical report. It was filled with illegible writing and terms that Sarah couldn't understand. At the bottom of the page, there was a signature and a stamp. Sarah decided to take the document to her acquaintance, Dr. Parker, to have it deciphered. The next morning, she went to the clinic, overwhelmed by a mix of fear and curiosity. The result of the consultation shocked her to the core. "Sarah, are you sure this is Annabelle's document?" Dr. Parker asked, looking at her with a troubled expression. "Yes, why?" Sarah's heart started to race. "Annabelle isn't 11, he said. "According to this, she's 33. This must be a mistake," Sarah stammered, feeling her legs weaken. "No, it's the reality. She has a rare syndrome that slows down her physical development. She looks like a child, but her mind has been adult for a long time. And there's more." Dr. Parker paused, as if weighing whether to continue. "There are psychiatric diagnoses in this document. She has been diagnosed with severe disorders, manipulation tendencies, aggression, even violence." Sarah was stunned. She silently stared at the document, almost hoping it would just disappear. Her hands trembled, and her voice sounded foreign to her. "What should I do?" "You need to be cautious," And maybe think about returning her to the shelter, Dr. Parker advised. These words felt like a final verdict. Sarah didn't know how to tell Michael. She spent an hour at home, gathering her thoughts before approaching him. However, the conversation with Michael turned into a conflict. "This is absurd, Sarah," he said, throwing his hands up in frustration. "You want to get rid of the girl just because some paper says she isn't a child?" "This isn't just some paper," Sarah exclaimed, feeling the tension fill every corner of the room. "This is a doctor's report. Her history hides terrible things, Michael. She's been through so much pain, and now you want to hurt her more? That's cruel. Cruel." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "What if she's a danger to us? To Timmy? You're just being unfair to her," Michael said coldly. "She's a child who needs love, and you're looking for reasons to get rid of her." Sarah couldn't say anything else. It felt like a wall had risen between them. She went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind was spinning with the doctor's words and Annabelle's chilling stare, which now seemed completely alien to her. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off in their home. Annabelle's behavior had become increasingly unsettling, and her manipulations were growing more subtle. Sarah began to notice how the girl would give Michael an excessive amount of attention that was hard to describe as typical for a child. She'd sit next to him on the couch, casually touch his hand or hair, and hold her gaze on him a little longer than was comfortable. One day, Sarah walked into the living room and found a strange scene. Annabelle was sitting on the floor next to Michael, gently smoothing the sleeve of his shirt. "You look so good when you wear that shirt, Daddy," she said with a warm smile, looking him directly in the eyes. Michael, taking this as innocent childlike admiration, simply laughed. "Thanks, sweetheart." But Sarah felt a chill run through her. Her intuition screamed that this wasn't as innocent as it seemed. Later that evening, Sarah overheard a conversation between Annabelle and Michael in the living room. Annabelle's voice was soft and almost soothing. "Mom doesn't love us. She wants to get rid of me." "What are you talking about?" Michael asked, clearly confused. "She looks at me weird," the girl continued, her eyes sparkling. "She's scared of me, and you know it." Michael paused, and that was enough to ignite a fire in Sarah's heart. She barged into the room, unable to listen to any more. "What's going on here?" Her voice cracked, and Michael turned toward her in surprise. "Do you hear this? She's trying to make me out to be the monster again." Annabelle's voice sounded so sincere that, for a moment, Sarah doubted herself. "You're being hostile, Sarah," Michael cut in. "Maybe you need help." Those words struck Sarah like a slap. She could feel Michael pulling away, while Annabelle only poured more fuel on the fire. Meanwhile, things at home were getting worse. Timmy had become withdrawn, evasive, and often locked himself in his room. One day, Sarah decided to talk to him but found his door locked. "Timmy, open up. It's Mom." "Go away." The boy's voice was barely audible. Sarah's heart shattered. Something was wrong, but Timmy didn't want to tell her. That night, Sarah woke to strange sounds. The wooden floor creaked under someone's footsteps. She stepped out of her room and saw Annabelle standing motionless at the end of the hallway, staring at her. "What are you doing here?" Sarah asked, but the girl didn't answer. She just smiled before slowly disappearing around the corner. When Sarah went into Annabelle's room to check on her, she found a notebook filled with disturbing drawings. Crude sketches of people with missing body parts, houses on fire. That was the last straw. The next day, Sarah called the police and social services. When they arrived, Sarah told them everything, from the gas incident to Annabelle's manipulation of Michael and Timmy. But Annabelle, as if anticipating this moment, greeted the visitors with an angelic smile. Her behavior was flawless. She even nestled close to Sarah, whispering, "Mom, why are you treating me like this?" The social workers looked at Sarah with disapproval. They accused her of creating a toxic atmosphere in the house. Sarah felt powerless. "She's setting everything up." Sarah cried desperately, but her words only seemed to confirm to everyone that she was unstable. When the social workers left, Annabelle walked past Sarah, smiling faintly. Her eyes gleamed as if she had won yet another victory. "You won't be able to prove anything, Mom," she whispered, and Sarah realized then that she was now alone against this terrifying creature, writhing in their home, tearing her family apart. The following night, Sarah woke up to a vague noise coming from the hallway. At first, she thought it was just the wind or the creaking of old pipes. But when the sound intensified, she realized something was wrong. Her heart began to race, and she jumped out of bed, frantically scanning the dark house. She heard a strange groan from Timmy's room. Her heart stopped. She rushed to her son's door, barely holding herself together when she saw it was slightly ajar. Fear gripped her chest, and the only thought running through her mind was, what happened? She opened the door and froze. Timmy was lying on the bed, his body covered in wounds. His eyes were wide open but no longer moved. And there, standing beside him, was Annabelle, the small figure holding a large kitchen knife, blood dripping from it. She wasn't scared, didn't look frightened. There was no doubt or remorse in her gaze, just a calm indifference to what had happened. "He was in the way," Annabelle said coldly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Sarah went into shock. She couldn't believe it. Losing control, she screamed, trying to dial the police, but the shock rendered her speechless. Her cries came from deep in her chest as she fell to her knees beside Timmy's lifeless body. "Timmy!" she screamed, desperately checking for a pulse, but there was nothing. He was gone. Annabelle calmly watched her, tilting her head, her gaze focused and serene. And suddenly, she raised the knife and struck Sarah in the back. A sharp, searing pain tore through her body. Sarah gasped, collapsing onto the floor as hot blood poured down her spine. She desperately grabbed at the walls, trying to escape, but her legs gave out. Her last attempts to flee were futile. As she struggled in the darkness, Annabelle closed in on her, driving the knife deeper, delivering the fatal blow. Sarah had no strength left to scream, only heavy breathing and tension in her body. Her last gaze fell upon the little girl, who seemed so indifferent to her suffering. Hearing the screams, Michael leapt out of bed and rushed into the hallway. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw what had happened. Sarah's gaze was vacant, lifeless. Blood poured from her body, and it was horrifying. Timmy was dead, and now his mother was too. Michael rushed to her, trying to help, but then he saw Annabelle slowly approaching him, knife in hand. "You can't change this," she said coldly. She moved closer, her movements precise and brutal, as if she'd been trained. Michael tried to push her away, but Annabelle was unervingly fast. She stabbed him with the knife, straight into his chest. He gasped, struggling to stay on his feet, but his legs wouldn't obey. The girl didn't stop. She gripped the knife as if it were her natural right. Her eyes held no emotion, only a cold emptiness. Michael collapsed, his hands unable to stem the blood pouring from his chest. The house filled with silence. Except for the soft drip of blood hitting the floor, there were no other sounds. After everything quieted down, Annabelle quietly wiped the knife on her clothes and stood there, in the heart of the darkness. She was satisfied with what she had done and didn't rush to leave. She knew her mission was complete. The police arrived only minutes after a neighbor called, having heard the screams. But when they stormed the house, they found only blood, bodies, and empty walls. Annabelle was long gone. As always, she had disappeared. A few weeks later, a new story appeared on the TV screens. A young couple had adopted a sweet, smiling girl named Annabelle. She was friendly, looked innocent, and held her new mom's hand with a sincere smile on her face. But this time, there was no sign of remorse. Her eyes remained cold and dark, and her smile was as fake as her story. Once again, it was only the beginning. Subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and leave a comment about what you think of Annabelle and her dark secrets. And remember, sometimes the sweetest faces hide the most terrifying intentions.